Legends Leapers.
Leader, you are a leader. You are a leader. Rising right up the ranks. You're a leader. Lessons will teach you just how to reach your endless ambitions. Oh, yeah. Look at yourself in the mirror. Turn that frown upside down. Show what you're working with. You can't depend on someone else to see your future. That part is up to you. Be a leader.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ramon Lowe. I am the Director of Membership and Industry Engagement with the Airport Minority Advisory Council. And welcome to our virtual program, Legends and Leapers. But before I hand it off to Ricky and Mori, just a couple of announcements from the national office. Ever since we started this, I'm going to keep harping it on and on and on, over and over again. Chapters. We have 6 chapters, hopefully soon 7, and hopefully by next year, 8. And we are accepting memberships now. Definitely join the chapter. If you are involved with AMAC on a national level, you definitely want to get involved on a local level. So please make sure you join a chapter. Again, it's $50 per person, per chapter, per year. And you can basically join as many or as few chapters as you'd like. We have Denver, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, DC, Portland, and LA. And I know that membership has been skyrocketing because they've just had a couple of events, Chicago, Denver, and LA specifically, and there's been a lot of interest. So please make sure you look towards joining our chapters. Related to membership, we have launched a referral program. So in essence, if you are a member in good standing and you know of a company who would like to become a member of AMAC, if you refer them, we will take $100 off of your renewal membership. Of course, that's up to members, up to $300. But we've launched this program, and you can go to our members page on amac-org.com to get more details. Again, we're running this special referral program until about January 22nd. Again, that works in conjunction with our launch of our chapters. And of course, our events, we have many events that are coming up, including this one as we head into the new year. Please make sure you take a look at our events page on the AMAC site. A lot of them, actually, most of them are virtually virtual events, and they are free of charge. And if you are new to this space or just wanting to learn, more about more people, please make sure you register. Again, there's not a fee. So anyway, enough about me. I want to hand it off to Ricky and Mori and our Legend Leaper. Take it away, guys.
All right, well, thanks, Ramon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here again. We have another amazing panel with Corliss and Marc, and Mori, who's co-hosting, always does an amazing job. She's so much better than Lauren at this, and so we look forward to having this session with Mori as the pilot, and I'll try to be a capable co-pilot. As you know, Legends and Leapers is an outgrowth of the Emerging Leaders Committee, which Mori and Lauren co-founded and they co-chair. I guess what we try to accomplish with this is we bring someone who's been around a little longer or may have been exposed to the industry a little longer, with someone who's relatively new, still learning the industry, still working his way up, and maybe there's a divergence in opinion on issues. I think what we've experienced over these many Legends and Leapers sessions is that in many cases the opinions are common, but there's some occasions where the two have a difference of opinion, and it's not necessarily aligned with being a legend or a leaper, just based on life experience. And so we'll see how today goes. But before we get into the questions, which have not been posed or made available to the panelists as of yet, before we get there, I'll turn it over to Mori, and she will do the introductions. Mori.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for having us today. I am excited to give you all a little quick background on both our leaper, who is Mr. Marc Brooks, and our extraordinary legend, Mrs. Corliss Stone-Littles. So starting off with Marc Brooks. So Marc B. Brooks is the CEO of Hyde Park Hospitality, a privately held management company that specializes in food and facilities operations, airport concessions, management staffing, and customer excellence advisory services. Marc has the unique ability to recognize talent as well as attract and develop diverse team members at all levels of the organization. From management to frontline employees under Marc's leadership, HBH, Hyde Park Hospitality, has grown over 900% since 2018. Very impressive. With more than 900 employees across 16 states, HBH was recently named by Crain's as one of the 50th fastest growing companies in Chicago. So as you all know, Marc today is a leaper, but he's very, very well on his way to a legend. So Marc, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Mori and Ricky, and it's a pleasure to share the stage with the great Corliss Stone-Littles. So it's an honor and a pleasure. So thank you.
Yes. And getting into our legend today, Miss Corliss Stone-Littles is the managing member of Corliss Stone-Littles LLC, also known as CSL LLC. This company and business was founded in 2005, operating originally out of the offices located in Colleyville, Texas. However, this is not her start in the airport industry. Prior to CSL, ARP Aviation Resource Partners was founded in Chicago, Illinois. So we've got two Chicago, Illinois.
Hyde Park.
Yes. And ARP was founded in 1988 to work with the airlines in the city of Chicago in development of Chicago O'Hare Development Program. Today, CSL LLC operates in 15 of the largest, busiest airports in the United States, starting with a long history in the #1 airport, our home, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, #2 airport, Chicago O'Hare. I'm glad that y'all noted that Chicago's right behind the city of Atlanta. And #3, Dallas-Fort Worth, busiest airports in the world. So she's in the top 3 airports in the United States. CSL boasts partnerships operating over 72 retail stores at airports around the country. She operates airport concessionaire brands, including Sunglass Hut, Johnson & Murphy, Luxiton, and Kells across the major 14 U.S. airports. The legendary Miss Corliss Stone-Littles, thank you for being here with us today.
It is my pleasure. And I'm looking forward to hearing about how Chicago's doing. So, and food and beverage. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, as you can tell, we have 2 amazing panelists. Both of them could be considered legends, but for the sake of this program, we have a leaper and we have a legend. And Mori, thanks for those introductions. So let's jump right in. So my first question, this group kind of cheated. They begged us, they forced us to give them a question in advance. And so this will be the first time that we've asked a question that was given in advance. And so for you two, we'll do it. And so my first question is, how was your holiday?
Well, I'll start. Mine was a blessed holiday because I welcomed my first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl. And so I don't remember the turkey, I don't remember the dressing, but I remember her smile. So it was
Oh, that's beautiful.
Congratulations. God bless.
thanks.
Yeah, and mine was blessed also. I got a chance to spend it here in Chicago over my mom's house, and family and friends gathered, and it was a great time together.
That's great.
So kick off the questions that you were not prepped on. So can both of you kind of give some insight as to, how did you get involved with AMAC? Was it a person that introduced you? Was it an event? So what is it that brought you to AMAC?
I think for me, just getting in the industry, you learn about critical networking organizations, and AMAC was mentioned countless times. So it's like, if you're going to be in this space, you have to be in AMAC. So again, for me, it was a natural. And again, it was really by word of mouth and a number of mentors and what have you that had mentioned it. And it's been a great joining the organization and really networking and building relationships ever since I've been in this industry.
And for me, I actually have an even longer history than they told you. So I actually started in aviation in 1985. So I was around to help put together AMAC. And so I watched it grow, seen its response to the industry, and was a fan then and am a fan now. And so grateful that AMAC has survived all these years and is growing. So I've been in since the beginning.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Miss Corliss, I want to ask you a specific question, because one thing that I didn't read, and sorry that I got that off on your bio, but one thing I did read that was very impressive is that you're a graduate from Harvard Law School. And you started your career with a focus in finance and development, which I can imagine probably has had a great impact on the work you do today in the concession space. However, can you tell us how you went from, being a Harvard Law School graduate to kind of maneuvering now into an entrepreneur with all of these airport concessions around the United States?
Well, the short answer is follow the money. That's the short answer.
Okay.
But when I left Harvard, I went to Chicago, and what else would Abe Lincoln's son do but start a law firm? So I went in-house to get my original corporate training with Isham, Lincoln, and Beale. And for that, I really always gravitated toward bond deals that were done in the public arena. So from, as you know, aviation, unlike private sector, truly private sector business, everything is about funding, and everything at an airport is so expensive. So from there, I went to United Airlines, where I was doing all the properties work for 3 countries and 33 cities in the US. And that meant bill, sell bonds, sell bonds, sell bonds. The evolution of concessions really came about because when you do a 30-year bond deal, and I was a bond counsel and then became corporate counsel, then you have to have 30 years worth of revenues. And our airlines, even United and American, weren't really the kind of security that the industry wanted, that the bond industry wanted. So we needed a source of revenue. And that source of revenue, other than the airlines, who were putting a lot of money into capital like airplanes, and we were selling the bonds to build buildings, concessions became a great source of revenue to support revenue bonds, to support build outs, to support and reduce the cost of airlines. So it's something that developed over time. It was not an answer, because it used to be, you went to the airport. Chicago always sold me a $15 hot dog and a $10 cup of coffee. Now brand names and all allow us to produce enough revenue to help all aspects of the airport community, all sides. And that was my progression, trying to figure out how to pay for it to becoming a part of something more than just the next deal.
That's very, very impressive. Follow the money, y'all. If y'all don't take anything from the day, follow the money. Yeah. And I guess this is because I'm sure Marc is similar. Like, Marc, one thing I've seen about you and your bio is that you have a very diversified portfolio. Like, saying, hey, you're focused on hospitality, food, communications, private equity placement. Like, how does that work when you make the decision to, in Corliss, you can second answer this with following the money and then your passion and following what you're here to do. Because, it's gonna be like, hey, I want to follow the money, but that's not what I'm here to do, or that's not my purpose or my passion. So like, how do you do that with so many businesses?
Yeah, I think for me over time, I was trying to find my way, and my late father was in the food manufacturing industry, so I got exposed to entrepreneurship at a young age, and I didn't necessarily know I wanted to go into food, but I did know that I wanted to control my own destiny. I wanted to provide jobs. Those were of interest to me. I had a chance after business school, Northwestern undergrad, and then Kellogg, got my MBA there. After B school, had a chance to work at a number of organizations, both before and after business school. So I got a chance to work on some pretty dynamic entrepreneurs in their own right. John Rogers, Aerial Capital Management with Melody Hobson, Jim Tyree, a guy who used to run a company called Mesro Financial, woman-owned business, Debbie Bricker, had a female consulting company called Brick and Associates, and Jerry Reinsdorf when I thought I wanted to go into sports management. So I was able to take lessons, and my father, of course, right? So I was able to take lessons from each of them. And what I found out in that journey, I joke about it today, was I was an okay employee, meaning that my heart wasn't in, respectfully, a lot of those positions. And I kept yearning and wanting to do more, and going back to, again, being an employer. And eventually got a shot to go into wireless, and we had some success there, and sold that corporation back to our wireless partner, major, that was actually Verizon at the time. It was the first deal of its kind, sold back to Verizon corporate. And after that, was really trying to figure out what was next, and had a number of relationships in the food industry, and decided to kind of jump into the game and make an acquisition of a restaurant group. So since then, I went on, I made a promise after running into some challenges as a freestanding restaurateur on the street, that I didn't want to be boxed in with one brand. I wanted to have barriers to entry. I wanted to have multiple relationships and represent multiple brands. And as Corliss said, I wanted to follow the money. So I started to learn a little bit more about the airport space. And actually, Mori, shout out to CI, because I was actually approached by your former president, Anthony Joseph, and Donata, when they were looking for partners in Chicago. This is going back into 2013, when we thought at that point O'Hare was coming out with an RFP. So they encouraged me to really look a little more thoroughly into airport concessions. I had already started to win some business on the food service management side in Chicago, but I hadn't really considered airport concessions at the time. And after learning more about it, my ears perked up, and I wanted to learn more. But I didn't land my first deal until 2018. So I started the company in 2012. And there was a sort of a 5 or 6 year gap between actually starting it and actually landing business on the airport side. So I'll pause there. I know Corliss may want to jump in and elaborate on her piece.
Well, for me, I think one of the things that when you work for an airline, and like I said, I was responsible for the design, construction, and startup for the Chicago operations for United, including Terminal 1, and then I worked for the international carriers to build Terminal 5. And one of the things you learn when you're on the airline side of the business is you think a lot about how much time they have to make decisions. So once we decided that concessions as an industry was a great way to add more monies into the airport model, while allowing airlines and other entities that were spending huge dollars on capital, like on an airplane or when a city decided to build a building, we looked at it from that aspect. And from that aspect, we went to more brands, because if you've only got 3 minutes as you walk past, I want you to see something that you immediately connect with. So for me, the selection of my partners, rather than developing new concepts, because there were a lot of gift shops and things like that at O'Hare, and I live in Dallas now, and in Dallas and other airports, we decided, what would you immediately see? You would immediately accept. Two things happen: branding and street pricing. That's what we pushed. So if you bought from my Sunglass Hut in Chicago, you could return it in Australia, you could return it in Miami, you could return it in LA. So, and you knew what you were getting. You knew Ray-Ban, you knew all the brands. So with If I think of you as a 3-minute shopper, because you're there to fly, you're not there to shop, and I can give you a product that you know you can return, and you know what you're getting, and you can make a decision in 3 minutes, that for me meant that I was always going to go to brand, and that's something that I would develop myself. So that actually marked how I approach the future. In addition, it just gave us so many choices because we could take things on airport and off airport. We can bring in brands, see what works, see what doesn't. And that allowed us to have much smaller spaces in airports than off. I mean, I do Johnson and Murphy and I do Kiehl's and things like that, but I don't have changing rooms and I don't need the square footage. Yet we were producing in those smaller spaces more revenue than the large stores in the mall. Again, because immediate name recognition, treating every customer as if they only had 3 minutes to decide, and making your decision not so permanent. You didn't have to fly back to O'Hare. You could return it anywhere. So that is how we positioned ourselves. And it gave us constant new product renewals. And if something wasn't working, just send it back. We actually worked with our vendors and we could move it to an off-airport location without that loss. So that really is how we made that decision and how we make those decisions today. What does the customer want and what can they see and make a decision on in a very short period? Because they're there to fly, not to shop.
Very
So,
impressive.
again, such amazing insight. Let me pivot a little bit. So those programs, those requirements, national and local, that have supported minority business development so well over the years, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, and the alphabet soup of local programs, and including the SBA program. These programs are all under attack, right? And there are signs that these programs may not be around in their current form for years to come, right? So for you, I guess the question is, so do we throw in the towel and declare that the world is over, or do we see this as an opportunity to reset and reload and become even stronger? I mean, there are periods, decades ago, before integration, there was evidence that as a community, we could actually do quite well. We kind of moved away from that, and so we're now more interdependent, is what I'll call it. However, with these programs going away that have provided such a crutch and an opportunity for many of you to enter, in this case, the airport space, with those opportunities, those requirements perhaps going away, how do you see the future? Do you see it being over, or do you see it as an opportunity to reset? And if you see it as an opportunity to reset, what does that reset look like?
Well, I'll start. One of the things it looks like is very expensive. The cost of building on an airport has risen. The numbers are, in many respects, from where we started, astronomical. So when we think about smaller businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, what scares me the most are two things: the cost of doing business, because if we have had some very successful companies, however, they tend to fall under, when you just say what those initials stand for. A disadvantage includes the economics of being in business, and as the cost of build out has gone up tremendously, that in and of itself has limited the number of people who could actually afford that and still fall in that category of small businesses. I applaud my partners, because my partners have always included us not only in the equity position, but in allowing us to truly learn what we're doing at our airports. In most of my stores, we look to be either the assistant manager or the manager even, and it's allowed us to do 100% owned stores in branded concepts. So my Kiehl's is something that we own 100% of. That I think we have to begin to target as opportunities, not having just teams where you have just an equity position and you attend meetings, but where you actually can name, my employees are my employees. They're not just an employee of the store. My people will be an assistant manager, and I can move them to another store and turn them into the managers who can then run 100% owned store. And we have to position ourselves as small companies to create management who understands all the aspects of what it takes to be in an expensive environment and run those operations and create contacts to allow us to continue to access capital and access product. So we have to be very strategic. If we do that, yes, I think the market will shrink because the dollars and cents of it will shrink it. But it will also keep us in the game and keep us learning. As we learn, we grow. As we grow, then we're the ones with experience. And as I said, I've gone from just partners to 100% owned national brands. And that's something that we should strive for. And you can be a small business and do that, as I am.
I'm going to let Mark respond, but I'm going to push on that a little bit. But I'm going to let Mark respond first.
No, look, Corliss hit on a lot of great points there. I think for us, we're trying to get ahead of the game. We're not trying to let that shoe drop. God forbid we're able to see the benefits of waiting this long to be part of a Chicago O'Hare RFP that's forthcoming. That being said, I mean, our strategy is probably a little different than most. Again, we came off the street. We still have a number of relationships there. We've won business there since I started the company back in 2012. We're not walking away from street business that makes sense. Food service management opportunities. We've just picked up a account with Guinness, the breweries. It's the second tap room in the United States. So we're doing all of the food service management work there. Companies like Facebook and others, we'll do food service management work there as well. So again, our strategy is a little bit different from that standpoint. That being said, I think innovation is going to be key as well, kind of not just waiting for the traditional deals that come your way. We were fortunate enough to structure an all ACDBE, 100% ACDBE deal at the first Chick-fil-A at Chicago O'Hare. So again, taking the lessons learned from, Daneta and Corliss and, Daryl Benton and all the other folks that are out there, really, I mean, you talk about these forums, these are important forums that you learn, really invaluable things from. And I asked myself, why can't we sometimes lead deals? Why can't we go after this thing directly? So in that case, I mean, we wanted to get ahead of the game, and there was an opportunity to do 100% on ACDB owned deal that passed muster, and we were able to bring the Chick-fil-A brand in Chicago, the first one ever. So I think it's innovation along those lines. We also got into the airport lounge management space back in 2019. It was at a time that it was, 2018 before it was a little sleepy, but that industry has taken off quite a bit. Our company does front of the house management. So that's more of a management fee play for us, no CapEx. So it's a cash flow play. So we like that end of the spectrum as well. So again, not having the ability to strike in our home market when we first got in the industry, we had to figure out, okay, how do we, do some deals without, they being the very typical traditional way. So I just gave you a couple of examples of that. And I think the innovation for us is going to be key. And sometimes leading initiatives will also be something we look to do.
So I'm going to push a little more. So Maryland has the largest population of minority-owned firms in the country. And at least half of those companies, those minority-owned companies, do not do business with government. They're doing very well and they're not doing business with government. In other words, they're not relying on, these requirements for participation, inclusion, right? So what is it about, and Marc, I mean, you have some of that experience as well. Not all of your success has been in a regulated environment. What is it about those conditions outside of a regulatory environment that has allowed you to succeed compared to the environment that an airport exists in? Again, I'm trying to get us to look at what life looks like
Yeah.
without the programs.
Yeah, I think, and this is this is with the utmost respect of, the folks on the line and those before us. Again, the program is the program. It's been a lot of success that's come out of it, but like you said, we're at a possible inflection point of what's going to happen with it, both short and long term. We've always tried to lead as a quality food service management company. We just happen to be Black owned. You can walk in the door and see that, but we lead with quality. We lead with, infrastructure. We lead with, resources. I think for us, this is the 11th year we've been in business, and I tell people it's the toughest because we're at a point where we've actually had to walk away from some business on the street, unregulated. We got to make sure it fits in our wheelhouse, and we also leave enough dry powder for concessions, opportunities coming down the pipeline. So we can be a little selfish about the business we're going after. But one thing that I've learned in some of the businesses that we won recently with some very big Fortune 100 companies is we've showed depth and infrastructure when we go into meetings, presentations, I give you an example, the Guinness deal that we went live with on the street. I had put 2 years of resources on that deal before we even went live. Now, that means you have to have, infrastructure to allocate out to be able to project manage and things of that nature over the lifespan before you even ring the cash register. So I'm also fortunate enough to, because of some success on the street, I've been fortunate enough to reinvest back in the business and bring on my partner and executive vice president, Cortez Carter, who most of you know, who's been in the industry, who, like you, Corliss, was on the other side. Yep. So I think for us, it's about reinvesting back in the business, really building a first-class senior leadership team and presenting a first quality product and service to whoever that client is, whether it be regulated or unregulated.
And for me, I would say we have to keep looking at the trends. Right now, when I first, I think we're seeing a push where there is going to be more limited space on airports, and we're going to have to be pushing into the food and beverage space because there's more food and beverage. We're seeing airports push a little bit more to doing food and beverage, given the airlines are pushing to take food and beverage down on airplanes. So retail is taking a step back. Right. I'm seeing spaces that were retail spaces that will be converted to food and beverage spaces. Also, there are more products there are also more products that now see that airport spaces, given the sheer number of people there are more businesses that want to be on airports. So the competition, the level of competition of street versus airport has also become big. And so we're competing. As the bigger producers that were in malls are finding their business drying up, it's becoming more consolidations that we have to, you got to keep your eye on who's doing business. For me, it has meant that I have been able to talk about where before they want me just to be a partner, they've allowed me to actually take 100% on store. So, and so you have to use that as an advantage because it's all about the business wanting to stay in business. The key is finding the means for a small business to actually facilitate the financing of an on-airport business, because the cost per square foot, the hours of operation, the cost of the employees, and all the fees that have to go with it. So if there's something that we could build for the future, I would say it needs to be finding a way to finance. True business people are out there, but finding a way to finance them where they can come in without simply being a small partner to a huge conglomeration under a larger name. Because I agree with you. We have to show that these years of programs have resulted in people who know the airport, know how to do business in the airport, and will drive revenues for the airlines and airports to stay in business and pay keep their costs down. Because we are what keeps the cost down for the airlines and the airports. But we need a source. We need a source of funding.
Yeah, no, I think that's a a great point. And even looking back to, when we started our company as a ACDVE company, the regulations then 40 years ago and the threshold to graduate is the same 40 years later, so even as a prime company, it's still hard to compete on that large level, so I feel like there is a level where it becomes difficult. It's almost like what you're saying, Corliss, like, hey, we want to be the operators. Like, a good partner is one that's going to position you to be the operator fully. And Marc, that's what you all are doing, like with the Chick-fil-A, like, hey, let's bring us together. Let's bring our resources together to operate this fully. But my question is, where is that middle ground with wanting to graduate and be a prime, but then, dealing with these large billion-dollar companies and kind of finding a middle ground where it makes sense? It goes back to Ricky's question, like, hey, what are the advantages on the street where you don't have ACDBE goals? You just got to compete. Like, where do you all see that middle ground in the airport space?
Well, for me, I will say, again, I started out as the partner, and now once I proved myself, they took what would have been me and Keels running a Keel store to me running a Keel store and having 100% ownership, to my Mac store where I had 100% ownership. And that's what we have to push for, is I will train under you. I will show you that I will operate the business the way you would operate the business, that I can make the standards and produce the standards that you would produce for yourself. And as they have struggled with the closure of malls, they're like, okay, well, you know what? If you can take, because if you walk into my Keel store, you're not going to say, I wonder who runs this store. It's going to hit every standard. We have to show, and we must push to, and it doesn't mean you have to have 100%. Maybe you have 2 minority partners. Maybe I partner up with you, and we can produce a Keel store that operates on an airport up to their standards. And instead of being a partner, we are a franchisee. I think that would do it. The second thing we have to do, though, and this is something that airport operators are looking at, and that is, and you've seen it, is we have to have lease terms that our banks will respect. When we were pushing down to 3, 5-year, and 7-year deals, a bank's like, do you see the amount of money that you want when all I can count on is 5 years? The numbers have to make sense on every side of that balance sheet. So for me to borrow the kind of money I need to open that single entity store, I need a longer lease term. And that's something that we all have to be involved in and provide feedback so that airport operators understand that what the elements are to that formula. Food and beverage, because we went from 30-year deals to 5-year, 7-year deals. That is a huge change. So it has to be a balancing of time in order to have greater capital contributions, in order to show a stream of revenue over that same period of time that will not only repay the loans, but we don't want a bank to wonder if we'll barely make it or if we'll make it. So it's lease term, having a good capital investment, and a banker behind you, and then creating partnerships where you may be too small to do it on your own, but create a partnership and then go into it together. That's my formula.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we all have to look for. We can't just look to the primes to support us. We have to figure out ways to support ourselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Mori, we're evaluating that on every deal, right? Where do we want to be? What's the deal on the table? What are we trying to get at here? I don't necessarily need to be everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not my particular strategy. I feel like you can be in a couple airports and live quite well. But it's the type of deal that you get in the market you're in. I don't necessarily feel like we need to lead every deal. I gave you an example of the Chick-fil-A deal where we're leading that, but that was kind of a one-off. But that was important to us to bring that first one there. That is not necessarily representative of every deal we're going to cut. The prime should, there are a lot of great primes out there, but again, I think it's the type of deal you cut that is really going to be indicative of, because you're going to be living together for a number of years. So you hope there's transparency, you hope there's trust, you hope there's respect. And again, I think for our end, I come from an environment, and it first started in wireless on the street, where we were bringing US Cellular and Verizon wireless stores to the urban community. And our goal was always to have those stores mirror corporate stores. So if whether you went into Verizon out in Schaumburg or you went on 87th and Dan Ryan, we wanted you to have the same feel, and we wanted it to be seamless. So we tried to take, and I think you talked a little bit about that, Corliss, in terms of how you operate your stores. We wanted to have that same philosophy of a first-class experience, just dynamic customer service and all the bells and whistles that, the corporate stores would have. So I've taken that same philosophy and tried to emulate it into this industry. But again, I'm perfectly fine. You talked about that. Where do you draw the line? How do you look at these things? I think each particular opportunity is different. And I think it really depends on the deal that's before you and who you're particularly partnering with as it relates to primes. Because again, you can learn a lot from the primes, and I think there's some great examples of CI is one of them, ACDVEs that have grown to become primes. So I think there are a lot of lessons learned there that we can leverage.
I agree, and that's why I do national concepts. I don't have a better product than the ones that are in my stores right now. And so the key, however, for me, again, is to keep an eye on what's happening off airport, because airports, for example, my Sunglass Huts, we many times, two things: street pricing, the ability to return it nationally and even internationally, and knowing the product before you even get in there, so that I can sell it to you in the short time, because you're there to fly, you're not there to shop. That's and then having a lease term that allows me to make such a large investment and know that I can prove to my bank that I can pay it back and be profitable. It's not enough to pay it back.
Exactly.
So my final word is know your numbers. That's really what it boils down to. Some people think, I've literally had people look at me and say there's gold and then there are hills. It is a business. People lose money on airports. People go out of business in airports. And with the trend to cutting lease terms and it does give more opportunity, but it doesn't necessarily create more profitability, because the baseline to get into the airport is so much higher. So you have to know your numbers, know your sources,
Yes.
realize the boundaries, and know that you can fail. If you can start with those as rules and continue to run your business on a day-to-day basis, not a pie in the sky basis, then I think we have an opportunity to succeed. The key in your original question, back to your original question, is how do we continue to gain access to that opportunity?
So,
you can't run a business if you can't gain access. And that does worry me. We need to continue to support. An airport is not a mall. It is a conglomeration of a community. It's Chicago, the city of Chicago owning the airport and working with us.
So I'm going to get one more. I'm going to get one more question in.
Ribbon.
I'm going to get one more question in, Corliss, because we're running out of time. One of the values to this program, being a co-host, is that I get to seek therapy on the spot, and so this is one of those moments. So there's a story here in this area, in the Baltimore area. There's a former businessman who owned a bakery, and he began to supply buns to McDonald's worldwide and became a multi-billionaire, right? And bought up a lot of valuable waterfront property in the area, passed away, unfortunately, and passed almost all of that, his wealth, to his son. And his son is now developing some of the best restaurants in the city and in other parts of the world. So every time I go into one of those restaurants, or I go into an office building, and I look at it and I think, it's just money. Here's why I need the therapy. Because there's this notion that a particular segment of the population is brilliant, right? Or they're just very good at doing stuff, and other populations are not necessarily that good. Here's why I need the therapy. Is it really just money, right? Or are there some segments of the population that are just better at it than we are?
Doesn't sound like it to me when I hear Corliss and Marc speak about how they operate.
Well,
And-
I think that Marc, you said it best when you look at, because you were talking about how where you were working and the groups you were working with. When you have money, then you don't have the title of DBE. So the question becomes, how do we graduate? And a lot of times people don't even want to graduate because it's a combination of money and access. Yeah. And if your access, which for me it was partially, my access came from them needing a DBE partner and knowing that I knew airports and knowing that I had something other to offer than money. So at times it's dangerous to graduate. Well, if you're not going to graduate, that means you're going to not have money. So that's the line. That is a very tough thing to do. Some partners will not continue to partner with you if you're not DBE.
Exactly.
So if I have too much money, I put myself out of business. So I like being small.
and you can graduate and it really be less money that you actually have as an owner.
Well,
right?
Because and particularly if you want to do a branded concept, because branded concepts don't just hand themselves out. They want to run them themselves. So if I graduate, they're not gonna say, wow, Corliss, we're gonna start giving you more stores. They're gonna say, oh, sorry, I gotta go find a DBE partner. So it's a double-edged sword. The intent is there, but in order to, Ricky, have the dollars, you have to be willing to graduate. And if I graduated, I don't think I would have some of the brands that I have today. And I don't have a brand. I love my brands. I think they offer quality and they offer opportunity. So I don't want to graduate. But
I'm glad you just kept it real, because that's a real, like, you're keeping it very honest and frank. And I mean, that's the reality. And it goes back to me saying, hey, that 55 million threshold is the same 50 years later. So it's like, it's not even playing fields if you're 55 million and my competition is $1 billion, right?
And
it's
your costs are going up. So your costs are increasing at a strong degree for capital build out. And the cost of employees going up. But your ability to make a profit has a cap on it.
Yeah, I know Marc wants to jump in. Notice my question. I'm trying to push us through a paradigm shift, because if these programs go away, we're going to have to learn how to talk without talking about these programs,
Yes.
right? And that's really where I'm trying to get you to speak to is forget about the programs and how do we excel without the programs, right? Because we've done it before. How do we do it again? Sorry, Mark.
No, I think that is, I think that's really the question of the day, right? Hopefully we don't see it forthcoming anytime soon, but I think it is definitely food for thought, and it's something that's could be right around the corner. But again, I would just kind of belabor what we talked about. The point we made is that a point I was making is that we're experiencing some of that today on the street. Those are not necessarily regulated or government set aside deals. I mean, we're just winning some business. And again, we're trying to take some of that approach into the airport space, both in and out of the airport space for that matter. So for us, we're just trying to look, as Mori alluded, I mean, and Corliss talked about, we want to stay in this kind of ACDB bucket as long as we can. But I think there's a lot of lessons learned in winning business on the street that is non-ACDB related that would aid us, that when we do cross that threshold, you talk about capital, obviously that's the key to everything, but I would argue that infrastructure is equally important, because you're going to have to act like the big boys when you cross that finish line. And in order to do that, in order to sign up, the Corliss Stone-Littles of the world, you better be bringing something to the table. So I think for us, we're seeing a little bit of both, if you will, Ricky. We want to toe the line as long as we can and operate under the confines as an ACDB. We're not close to, tipping over. We got plenty of room. I don't know about Corliss, but we got a little bit of room. Corliss, feel free to send some business this way. You want to make sure it's the good margins though, if you do send it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's also, but you really have to get close to your partners, because the ones where we've been able to, instead of just being a partner, are instead 100% owned and created a franchise. That's, Ricky, one of the things that I think we have to shoot for on the retail side. I think food and beverage can have a sense of place is great in food and beverage. But national brands work a little bit better in some of the areas of retail. So I'd rather be in food and beverage and give you a taste of Chicago, or a taste of Dallas, or a taste of Miami. Retail, I'm pushing to say, see my experience, see my access, rate me on what I run now. And instead of making me a partner, give me a franchise. And I will run it 100%, follow the rule. You will have the store that you would have if you ran it. I think that's something we have to push for in order to remain in the industry. And those who are in the industry, if these programs begin to go away, should be pushing to stay there because of their experience on airport. But if you want to use your experience on airport, you've got to be seen. You've got to let the airport operator know that you're collecting that experience as an airport. And have, I think they can help push it as well. That's where I'd like to see on the retail side. It's tough.
Yeah, one of the things I would just say on that point too, Ricky, I think it really depends on what type of organization you're trying to build. Are you trying to build one that passes, 2-3 generations down the line? Are you trying to see an exit at some point in time? Are you trying to be part of a merger and roll up together to go and be, as you graduate? I think some of it is strategy on that ACDB's part and what he or she is trying to build. And I think if you talk to 3 different people, you might get 3 different answers. So I think it depends. Really, it's a kind of a personal decision of where you're trying to go after. But to your point earlier, the market, the industry might dictate for us where we go if we don't plan accordingly. So unfortunately, that is it could be around the corner. The other thing I would say is, and Corliss has touched on this, is we're just at an interesting time where labor costs are just becoming more and more prevalent on the P&L. I mean, they've already been a big ticket item, but they became bigger in a number of markets, whether it be California, with Governor Newsom passing, the 20-hour wage rate there. You got Chicago that just had 2 back-to-back unprecedented wage hits for small business owners. It was the Chicago paid leave ordinance, and then there was the phasing out of the tip workers that really affects more on the street. The progressive sort of philosophy of the current mayor and what's going on is it's a big push by labor right now. And I think we're going to start to see that more and more prevalent in a lot of airports. And again, you go back to that, $1 and you divide it up so many times, there's only so much cost we can pass on to the traveler, so, we're going to have to look at innovation and how that can be beneficial. Pricing, there's only so much pricing you can take, but we're going to constantly have to be reevaluating the P&L. And again, to Corliss's point earlier, you talked about, if you're going to be dealing with a smaller margin, I can't be doing it at, a 5-year lease term.
Especially when you add in street pricing. Street pricing was a great boost to the industry. People used to try their best not to buy anything at an airport. So if we're going to move away from street pricing because of the increased cost of an airport, we're going to have to figure out how that works as well. So is there a different way to bring down the cost of building in an airport so that we can do what our passenger responds to, which is street pricing? They don't want to have to decide, I don't really need this, I can wait till I get off airport. So there are strategies that require us to work together.
Yeah. Well, I want to end. I know Ricky might have a final question, but I have a final. He doesn't. So I have a final question to both of you all, starting with you, Marc, because I love that you made the comment like, what is your goal in business? And it's okay if it's different things, but you as a second generation entrepreneur, and then clearly I know both of Marc's daughters, one of his daughters, I worked with her in the wellness space, and he has 3 fabulous, beautiful daughters. And what is your vision like in your involvement, and what's your idea of your legacy that you want to be remembered for, or having your daughters be a part of your business in the future?
In 30 seconds or less.
Right, in 30 seconds. I think for me, just being a great employer is always what I wanted to be, and really provide opportunities for people that work for me. It's nothing like for me to see somebody that, is an hourly worker that rises up the ranks to be a regional manager, and for me to position them both in and inside of the airport opportunities. That to me is really the big win that I'm looking for. I think time will tell whether or not my daughter has become interested in the business, or my partners, or whomever. But we're really just trying to build a first-class, food service management company that really focuses on the airport space and really provide opportunities mainly for people of color.
I love that. And Ms. Corliss, when you look back at your career, what are you most proud of?
You know what, and I really have to say again, we started 38 years ago, Lordy, and the person who started on day 3 is still with me. And the people that have come since then, I have a lot of my people have been with me for 10 years or more, and we have promoted them and trained them. Some people came in and just took really entry-level jobs, and they have moved up and moved up. We stay with them. We provide and we make sure that they get a variety of experiences, not only across positions, but across different stores. And some of them have moved from state to state from me. If we can continue to do that, then we are creating the future of our business.
Ramon, as we turn it back over to you, I think we've renamed the show Legends and Legends. This is wonderful.
That's because I'm so young. You just couldn't do that.
Corliss is not the years, it's the mileage, right? Don't worry.
Okay.
No, we definitely want, and this has been a great session. I appreciate you guys participating, as do Mori and Ricky. I'm just looking at those who are in attendance, and it's great to see that Chicago is represented, especially the president of the Chicago chapter, Doreen Littman. So let me put in a shameless plug in and say that, you can join the chapter. Please make sure. And we'd have, Miss Mori knows, the ATL is next. So you got to be a member of the national office first so you can join our chapters and get involved. But that's all I have, Ricky and Mori. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm just these were two great panelists. So I'm just grateful for the conversation and the authenticness of both of you all.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. It was really great. And Corliss, thanks for letting me share a little bit of the light with you.
Hey, listen, they scared me. They wouldn't tell me the questions. I was expecting worse.
They wouldn't tell me either.
But I think they tried to scare me on purpose. So good job, guys. Good
I
job.
learned a
Thank
lot,
you
and
for
I
that.
appreciate the free therapy
I really
session.
appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. I feel the same way.
Thank you,
All right, guys,
everybody.
take care.
Have a great holiday, folks.
Great
Take
holiday.
care.
Have a great holiday.